Inspiring Body of Christ Church is an anointed ministry where we use the Word of God to win souls for the kingdom of God. We are fishers of men, and our church is uniquely equipped with the largest privately owned aquarium in the world. All of the marine life that you see in our tanks have to go through a time of quarantine. So here is a recap of our previous episode of Quarantine with Pastor Rickie Rush.
This is what God thinks about us. He said, I got plans for you to prosper. I'm not going to harm you. And what he was talking about here in the Bible, where this comes from now, so you'll understand, the children of Israel had been restored from captivity, okay? All that stuff they were going through, he said, that's not who I am. Israel had been in the Babylonian captivity for 70 years, and God told them that he was going to bring them out of the captivity, and he's going to bring them into a place where they were going to prosper. And I'm sorry if I'm going too fast. I'm just excited. Let me slow down. He said, I'm going to bring you to a place where you're going to prosper and you're going to do good. Good stuff is going to come to you. Okay? And his plans for them are the same as they are for us. Good, not evil. Everywhere you look, there's evil. But everywhere you look, if you just look close enough, there's God. Now, you just have to decide how you're going to look at it today. Everywhere you go, there's evil. Pastor Rush, I tell you, every time you turn around, the devil's busy. Watch this, watch this, watch this. But every time you turn around, God is blessing. I'm talking about hard times, hard people, bad times, bad people, but a good God.
Thank you, Father, for revealing your word to me today.
And now, another episode of Quarantine with Pastor Rickie Rush.
For revealing your word to me today.
Well, all right, here we are again. It's 6 p.m. This is our third service of today. This is Pastor Rickie Rush. We are live at the Inspiring Body of Christ Church. And I want to welcome all of you who have perhaps never been with us at our 6 p.m. service before. We do a service on Sunday morning at 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. And 6 p.m. is the service that has been dedicated to our Dream Church. Meaning that there are a lot of young people, young adults in IBOC who have a very serious relationship with God. And they are on the front lines of change in this nation. They're on the front lines of change in our community. They're even on the front lines of making sure that the church that we used to love is the church that we have learned to love still now. I want to thank you. Now today, when we get into a subject, we started to talk with a group of young people in our church, and we had a sit-down conversation a couple of weeks ago, and we wanted to find out, what are young people doing during this lockdown season, and now, thank God, we're asking for the city to kind of go back a little bit, close some of these bars and restaurants and all these things so that we can get a grips on what's going on health-wise with COVID-19, and with a lot of protesting going on in our nation and people standing for justice all over the country and being able to say, hey, there are some things that need to be taken care of and taken and put to the front burners of our concerns. With that happening, we got all the protests, and now the, not saying because of that, but probably in the wake of that, we have a lot of illnesses that are coming down on people. Our young people have noticed that there's one issue, or there are several issues that I think the adults that are listening need to be made aware of. And one of those is simply that young people are feeling a lot of grief. They're feeling a lot of hurt, a lot of pain, a lot of discomfort. And we have been able to do everything that we could and that we can do as a church to bring some comfort to those areas, including bringing some of their questions to the forefront, letting them have a voice and some permission to be able to say some things Teenagers don't necessarily drive and have their cars and can go in places that they need to go to actively show their support. And some of them right now are not even eligible to vote, but they do have an opinion, and they do influence our opinions, and we do listen to them 100%. That's one of the greatest things that I've learned as a pastor, is to be able to listen to the young people that God will put under your charge, and so that they can become the leaders of the church today. And in so many ways, man, they're doing such a great job. So with that being said, we're going to do something different today, because if you're tuning in with us now, I ask you to come, because I think this is a very powerful lesson. Very powerful. Now, generally, I won't do what I'm about to do now, but I want, because this subject is so sensitive, and I want you to stay so in tuned. I want us to go from like 6, and I want the session to kind of end today right at 7:30, okay? And generally I don't do that. I don't like to do that, because I don't like to put a box around it, but I have to, because I am so serious about you being a part of all of this and listening to what we're having to say, and what I think the message is that God is trying to get us to understand. Okay, so I don't want to spend a lot of time with a lot of introductions and a lot of introductory statements. I want to tell you right now that if you, during tonight's session, have a question, and tonight we're going to go into some areas now. We're talking, before we even start, we've been talking about grief, but don't get offline now. Please don't do that. But how are our young people, how are our adults, how's the nation handling grief? There are some of you whose parents have died, children have died, brothers and sisters, spouses have died. And it's also been at a time when you couldn't even have a funeral. You couldn't go to a hospital. You couldn't be there with them. And people sometimes think that we're all right because we've been told to say we're all right. But in a lot of cases, we're not. So what I want to do tonight, again, because our young people have asked, and I have a few in my studio audience tonight, just a few scattered around here. We just finished having pizza with Pastor on the parking lot. Pizza with Pastor on the parking lot. Okay, so we were very, very separated. So separated that, everybody had their own individual pizza. And thank you, IBOC, for supporting our young people in this effort to they don't get a chance to do a whole lot, y'all. They really don't. They didn't. The fellowship, they weren't high-fiving, they weren't in groups, nothing like that. But we just drove around our fountain. We were able to eat some pizzas with Pastor in the parking lot with parents. I can't think of any other P's to say. All right, so just be patient. Anyway, so that being said, I have a few of them here in the audience today. If you have a question and you don't want to reveal who you are, that's 100% okay. All right, I have to set a lot of guidelines tonight, because this is not a normal type sermon message, okay? So I have to set a lot of guidelines. I'm going to give you a number right now to to text your question. It won't ask your name. We won't know about that. We don't need to know about that. All I'm asking is that your questions are decent and in order, and I'll have your questions with me. We do this all the time here, and I'll answer them, according to how they come in, and if I have an answer for that, or if you want me to speak on that subject. But you're going to text 508-455-5562. It doesn't matter if you're 10, 15, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, or 80 years old, okay, or 90. Sister Glenn may have a question today. We know Sister Glenn's 90. It doesn't matter your age. It doesn't matter how crazy it may sound to other people. Go ahead and ask it. That's why we're here. That's why we're here, and we're going to talk today. Now, one other thing we're going to do, I'm going to ask a very intense question. We're going to use what we call here IBOC. The C in IBOC today stands for cloud. So we're going to have a cloud, word cloud, okay? We're going to build a platform so that I'm going to ask some questions, and you're going to have some opinions about those questions, and we're going to be able to give you a chance to, in some cases, answer them, and in some cases just participate, and so we can find out how many people are really listening, that are really interested, and how this conversation can be different. All of that's a part of introduction. So if you're going to be I want everybody, even if you're not going to, just right now, go to your phone, go to the text messages in your phone if you have your phones with you. Go to your texting part. Okay? Go to your texting part. And you're going to send a message saying IBOC. That's your message. Now, you're going to send it to 22333. 22333. Okay? And you'll see where it's going. It's going directly into IBOC, Inspiring Body of Christ Church Ministries, and we won't see who you are. We won't check that. We won't. It's not some setup to get a number to put you on a particular mailing list and all of that. Okay, it's just so that right now we can communicate, because at IBOC the C stands for what? Communication, and we do a lot of communication. Okay, all right. So that's where we want to go today. All right, so right now, everybody, whether you participate now or not, I'm going to ask some questions or make some statements later, and I'm just going to see if we can pull this, just take this distance and just like that. Because if we were in person, I'd be able to hear you say amen and thank you, Jesus, and hallelujah, and raise your hand. And that's right, and I agree with that. And every young person would be able to say, with a mask off their faces, they'd be able to show me that they're smiling with something or something is troubling them. So to make sure that we close that gap, we're going to use the cloud today, and you'll see how things will pop up behind you and behind me. But on your screen, you'll see how it works. If it's brand new for some of you, just relax a little bit. I've had to learn to relax. I'm trusting our young people. Our young adults are doing an excellent job at making sure that we operate with the technology that helps us to say we want to stay connected with your world, with our world, with this world system, but at the same time, be spiritually connected with God and not lose track of his wisdom as he guides us through this troubling time. I'm going to have a prayer. After the prayer, remember, we want you to go right now to text messages, text your message to IBOC, saying IBOC, but you text it to 22333 and get ready for the cloud. If you have a question, there is a number that will be in the lower third of our screen during this particular broadcast. Go ahead and do it. When it pops up, the phone's right here. You'll see it, and I'll be able to do it. There was a time when this would be so distracting, but now it's absolutely necessary. Why? Because we really want to reach out and touch you. Instead of you just always hearing what's here, I want to hear what's here from your heart also. All right. So if you don't mind, I'm going to just ask a word of prayer over this service, and we're going to get started. Father, thank you this evening for bringing us through 2 services today. And now as we're into this 3rd service, God, you made this schedule. You set it up for us. You ordered it, and we're here out of total obedience because we know there's something you're going to say today that will help us to be stronger witnesses in this world. Lord, we know that we are called to go out and reach the world, and we can get on a plane to do it, and we can't go down the highway and freeways and do it, and we don't drive. Some of us are just young people, and we really want to help, but we can do it digitally. We can do it using the electronics. So, okay, God, whatever information you're going to pour into us, we know it's going to benefit us in the future, but it's going to bless us right now. In Jesus' name, amen. Whoa! Okay, every week I have the opportunity to be able to stand here and be part of being one of the proudest ministries in America, the Inspiring Body of Christ Church. Okay, so here we go. Now, first of all, I want you to be fair. What we're talking about now was not a part of something that we studied to talk about. It wasn't something that, I can say that God lined it up and I'd been working for months and weeks. No, our young people had the floor and they started asking questions. And one of the questions was, how do we handle grief? Either grief right now, or with everybody talking about all the other things, grieving has become a very major issue. So much so that there are so many of you that are listening right now online. Thank you for coming. So many of you say, Pastor, I want to know what to pray for. I want to know what to talk to people about. Well, sometimes when God says, here's the platform, and I'm going to tell you how people are feeling, now we have some insight on some things that we can learn. If you're not grieving right now, God bless you. If you're grieving and didn't know it, God bless you. If you know of someone who is and you just didn't know what to say to them, God's going to give us some keys into it today. Grieving is never never easy to talk about, and it's never fun. But we're going to try to keep it as light as possible. And no one's going to hear anything condemning. I am not trying to debate with anyone about grieving or about other issues in this world. But I do want to get right to the point about grieving and to just catch us up now, okay? Because last week when it hit us. A lot of us didn't have a chance to have notes. And, oh, my goodness, I want to take a picture of that. I don't know what that is. Can I take that slide? So what I wanted to go through again was just explaining how we got into this grief. I was talking about, several years ago when at my mother's passing. Now, grieving can cover a lot of areas. You can be grieving losing a job. You can be grieving losing an animal. You can grieve losing a relationship. You can grieve losing someone that's not alive anymore. So there's different levels of this. Sometimes you see tragic things that are happening and it hurts so bad. And people tell you to suck it up and be strong. And you just can't do it because it's hurting so bad inside of you. So what we're going to do today is try to talk about some of the different reflections and areas and observations and things that we go through when we deal with grieving. I didn't learn until later on in life that I was made at a very young age to deal with grieving, and I had to keep living, and it was very unbelievable. Some of the things that happened early in life, and I'm particularly talking about the passing of my mom, but I had to live life with a heart that had half the heart torn away, and I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to call it. And so if you're a grief counselor and if you're an expert, please, by no means are we trying to say that we're just plain old ordinary, wonderful people here that live practical living in Jesus Christ, and we just try to help people. So, okay, if you have a different word for it, thank God, and help us to call in and let us know. But it was like a tearing away for me at some point, And so I, over the years, had some questions about why could it be that something happened so long ago, but it still seems so fresh. It still affected my attitude. And then I started to talk to God about some things, and this is a definition, just our definition of what grief is for those of us who have lost loved ones. Okay, we're going to walk you through it, and I hope and pray that your healing and helpful healing starts now. I want to say this before we start. Grieving is not something that you should be rushed out of or to make you think that you'll be over it in a minute. We're going to show you tonight, probably not. Okay, grief. Grief, we learned last week, is loving someone after life. Now, that's our own personal definition of it, okay? After life. You're still loving, but they're gone. They're not around you anymore, but you're still loving them. And so sometimes people will say to you, why am I having such a hard time? I mean, he's gone, she's gone, they're gone. I don't have them around anymore. Guess what? You're still loving them. Life is gone, but you're still loving them. Right there, right now, is enough for someone to say, Pastor, here, I want to leave an offering. I want to thank God I'm out. That's all I needed to hear. But please, get more from it. Get more from it. There's nothing wrong with your mind. You're loving someone after life is gone. Okay? Now, that's okay for some people. So tonight, we don't want to talk about necessarily who it was or who it is that you're grieving. Tonight, I want to focus on this one. I want to focus on the survivor. That's you. Let's keep the focus there for those on the internet, please. We want to make sure that you understand the survivor. That's who we want to focus on tonight. You, the survivor. Now, when we talk about the survivor, we went through about 10 steps we're going to go through. These steps do not come in order. Nope, they don't come in order. Not at all. They don't come in order. They come in different ways. They come at different times, and yours is not going to match anybody else's, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. No, like that. It's not going to happen like that. I'm trying to pull up my current questions here. All right, so they're not going to happen in order, but here's how we learn to talk about them. We went through these steps. If you're with us for the first time, we've already talked about this. Shock, okay? Shock is one thing that we want to kind of talk about that you go through. You have what you call grief shock, okay? And it kind of, oh my gosh, that was kind of sudden. And you learn to be grateful to God for the numbness that's in your heart, okay? Another one is denial, okay? Denial. When we talk about denial, you can keep the camera focused there, please. When you talk about denial, it's not coming up. When you talk about denial, sometimes when you grieve, you'll go through denial. I know I have. And that happens like sometimes death can be so sudden, and I'm going fast because I'm trying to catch us up. And I'm trying to catch us up because I'm concerned and I care that you listen tonight, okay? It's not important that I have all this great information or stuff. It's important that those of you, if it's just two of you that get blessed tonight, man, you'll be grateful for this. So sometimes when you go into denial, it's your mind's way of helping you to feel normal and natural and beneficial. It is beneficial to be in denial sometimes. And it'll go on for a while to be in denial of something that's kind of a shock or kind of can happen pretty quick. And if it goes too long, then you should really seek some professional help. Another area that we talked about already was anger. And we talked that anger, you got to be careful as the survivor. As the survivor, you got to be careful about anger. You may notice some words coming out of your mouth. I used last week the word venomous words, tough words, painful words, hurting words that you never really normally would notice coming out of your mouth. And if you notice yourself being sharp at people or quick with people, you sometimes say you're sorry, as quick as you can. Try to recognize it. Sometimes you will feel a little bit of guilt even coming toward yourself. And it's simply your reaction sometimes to pain when you start lashing out at people. When you start feeling guilty with yourself, cut yourself some slack. Okay? And wait a minute. Stop getting on yourself so much. When you start going through anger, you say things that you didn't mean to say to other people. You say things even about yourself that you shouldn't say. You're going to be able to deal with it later on, but right now it depends on where you are as an individual. You'll be all right when your mind returns from this pause. You know, you just need a pause in your life when you're going through grief. All right? Okay. Now, again, we're just showing all the areas that we missed last week if you weren't with us. We covered these in detail. So another area we talked about was support. Okay? We talked about support and how important support is. You, the survivor, you're the person now who's, if you're grieving, that means, of course, you're alive to understand that your feelings and your reactions and things you're going through are real. There are people that want to help you, and I said last week, go ahead and let them. Now, everybody that wants to help you, they may not know how to help you. But they just want to because they don't know what else to do. Another area we talked about last week, again, you're the survivor. You're the survivor. And if you're taking these, you're just hitting these words, okay? Because we went into serious detail. But this week, we're going to just get on one area and stay for a minute. So we also talked about loneliness. And a lot of people sometimes gather around you. They want to console you when you're going through grieving moments. That's normal for people to want to do. And you have to realize when you're going through loneliness that nobody else had the same relationship with the person that you had. And sometimes people might even say, I really know what you're going through. And I said last week, and I didn't mean to insult anybody when I said this, but they really don't. But there's no explaining that to the person who says, I really know what you're going through. They don't, because you had a relationship with this person, whoever he or she were. You had a relationship that no one else has had with them, but no one else had with them, okay? Even if he had other daughters, other sons, if it were your dad. He may have had 7 sons. Being that second son, you had your own second son relationship, okay? So just understand that loneliness as a survivor, it happens. Then we talked about the loss of desire. See how much you missed last week? Man, but I just want you to go back and maybe you can pick it up on our episode. I think it was number 55 or something like that. You can go back on our site and pick up and get these notes for yourself. Another one was the loss of desire. Now, when we talk about loss of desire, for a while, nothing else is going to matter after you're going through grief. You're surviving. You don't care about nothing. You don't want to eat. You may not want to, people want to go jogging. You may not want to eat food. You may not want to sleep, or you may just have a desire to sleep. You don't want to do any of your hobbies. There are things that you used to love to do when you're grieving. You lost desire, period. Okay? And you're going to have a hard time being patient with the rest of the world around you. And it may sound like somebody's, you're not even noticing that things are changing around you. But you've had a crash in your life. Now, please listen to me. I'm not saying all these things are going to happen in a week, 12 weeks, 13 weeks. Sometimes they go on for months. They go on for years. But that's why people don't necessarily want to publicly talk about grief. Because someone thinks you just flip a switch and then it's all done. And it's not. You can do so great for 8 weeks, 9 weeks, 2 years, and then one day a song will come over the radio, or weather will change, and you'll just go into this place, and there's nothing wrong with your mind, but you're still loving when the life is not in someone. Okay? Loving someone who's just not in your life anymore, in a natural sense. I think last week we start with the loss of desire. So this week I want to talk a little bit about depression, and then I want to go into another major area. When you're going through grief as the survivor, if you're going through things, you may notice I'm never going to be depressed. I'm not that kind of person. That's what we say a lot. We say that. But something called the blues, it just seems to be an epidemic stage in our culture today. Depression is all around us because people are constantly stressed and culturally restricted from talking about what's bothering them. We have so many games we can play, so many things that we can do, so many different areas of fun we can have, or so many other things to distract, that nobody really wants you to deal with what's really bothering you. And depression can have a lot of sources, okay? A lot of sources. Anger that's felt but never expressed. You can get depressed about that. Depressed, I wrote a book called Come Out Swinging. And in that book, one of the areas I talk about with depression is that sometimes it's like a tire being deflated. You're all of you, you're all there, you know, there's nothing missing on you, except you're just kind of flat. You're deflated. That's what depressed is. You're not encouraged. You're like discouraged. Your courage is leaked out. And so you're kind of flat, and you're like deflated and depressed. And so that's just a way to see it. Some of you can get in your cars right now. If you have automatic cars that are working now, you didn't run over anything. It's just one tire is 34, one tire is 34, one tire is 34, and this one back in the back could be 29. And you didn't do anything different. It just deflated. Pressure, heat can sometimes cause your tires on your car to deflate. And in your life, pressures, heat can sometimes cause you to deflate. Loneliness that settles in for a long time and for long term, that's kind of like depression, but that's grief that just won't let go. I'm not trying to dress this up, make this pretty. I'm not trying to make it seem as if you ought to be ashamed of yourself for being. No. Sometimes it just won't let go. You need to talk about what you're feeling. You need to talk about it, though, really. And there are some great warriors that have gone through grief who've learned to just talk about it. And if people don't understand, hey, guess what? They just don't understand. But you need to talk about it. Don't try to make everybody think that the road is crooked. It's the tire that's deflated. We don't have to try to make people think that life has gone bad. You're deflated. You're depressed. So you need to not ignore it. Ignoring sometimes people will come around and they'll tell you to be strong. Now hear what I'm about to say. You may have to ignore that for a while. What did you just say? Yeah, I'm talking to real people today. You may have to ignore people telling you to be strong because that's just their way of saying that it makes it easy or makes it uneasy to them when you cry. When you cry, it's uneasy for other people to deal with. So they'll try to say be strong because they don't want to see you cry. Okay? So if you're sad, just say it. And there are people that can't handle being around you at that moment, and that could be okay. That doesn't mean that they're not your good friends and they're not loyal and they're not ride or die. They just don't know how to handle when you cry. Okay? Talk to them if you can. And maybe sometimes if you're going through depression, it can affect your body physically, or even there are chemical factors that contribute to your depression. So sometimes you have to go and talk to someone in a medical profession. So that's what we talk about when we talk about depression. And that's another step. That's another step in dealing with grief, is depression happens. Now, I'm going to go into an area tonight now on I don't know if this is number 8 for us. We didn't really number these. They're just areas that we have learned to talk about, and we're very open. We're talking about those here, and sometimes there are things when we're going through pandemics or whatever we're going through. Sometimes people are not allowed to talk about things. That doesn't mean that those things still don't affect them, and that doesn't mean that those things don't have some harm that it's doing. So what I'm going to go into now, we're not. I need you to hear me. I need you to understand that this is not condemning. You don't have to act as if you're supposed to be the master of it. But what we notice a lot of times right now is that there's something that starts very early sometimes that if someone had talked about it, it could not have been deadly or damaging later on in a person's life. So this next area that we're going to talk about as the survivor. Now you're the survivor. So here we go. I want to talk about compulsive and addictive behaviors. Okay. Now that's how we're going to start this, and that's how, if you're going to write this down, I want you to write it down. Write that down, and I want to pray right now that God would guide our minds, because we're going to go into an area now that people don't like to talk about it. Churches don't like to talk about it because it makes people uncomfortable. Some people can't because everyone feels like at some point we all have different types of addiction. Let me see. There's a question. Can you ever grieve enough? And someone's asking a question now, and I will never call a person's name or anything. Or is it like a stain that won't fully go away? Yes. See, and that's a perfect. You're gonna remember, and this is just the definition God gave me. So if I'm wrong, please forgive me. But I promise this is what God gave me to just help me with it and help me with other people. You're just loving someone that doesn't have life anymore. Okay? You're loving someone after life is gone. And so I don't know how long that stain lasts in anybody's life because I don't know how deep it was. So yes, it's almost like it won't go away. Now you learn to function, and today we're talking about the survivor. But what about that survivor that didn't have this class, that didn't come in here today, didn't have a chance to talk to us? Okay? Now, here we go. I'm going to ask a question, and all of you that are listening online now, we're going to do a little word board here to bring us all in. I'm going to ask this question, and one question I'm going to ask, we're going to kind of do a little survey real quick, and you'll see it come up behind on your screen as soon as I say it. But you have to respond to it. Now, you respond by going in the little search box on your phone, 22333. That's all. And then you send a message to IBOC. That's in your message. You push that. Now that means that we're going to hear from you. And so here we go. And I'm not nervous about it. I just have to be extremely, extremely careful. The one thing I always ask God is to help us to be practical, to help people. This is not, I'm not toting my Bible in my hand. I have it in my heart. But I'm not pointing my finger. We're not going to do all of that. We're not going to allow that. But here's the question. Have any of you that are listening right now, if you can hear me, do you know of anyone whose life has been destroyed, or they destroyed someone else's life because of alcohol? Right now, answer that question. We're going to see what this is like. Do you know of someone whose life has been affected by alcohol? They may have destroyed someone else's life, or it's affected in some kind of way. Okay. I'm going to stay in here for just a second. I want you to see this. Here at IBOC, we are intentional about hearing from you and making sure that you understand what we're talking about here. And I may ask a couple of other questions here. Whoa, in just a minute. Do you know someone whose life has been affected by alcoholism or alcohol? Okay. Now, I have not been, I don't know how long to wait for these answers, so I'm not trying to, but it seems like we responded pretty fast. So I think if I can kind of move on now. But I think we have a great understanding that almost 89%, almost 90% of every one of you that are listening here knows someone whose life has been affected by alcohol. So I think it's a fair statement to say that everybody knows somebody whose life has been destroyed by alcohol, based on what we just talked about right now. If we were to talk about the survivor, is it possible that as a survivor, one of the things that can happen to the survivor is that he or she could go into a compulsive addiction and start being exposed to alcohol? Are we okay talking about this? Is this the place to talk about it? Yes, y'all. Yes, it's church. Sometimes people, I think there's a time and place for everything. This is the time and this is the place. Now, if it doesn't apply to you, please don't go offline. I think that's awfully selfish for us to talk about this, because there's somebody that you're going to be able to bless, somebody that you're going to be able to learn to maturely listen to. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to ever have anything. May not even know the name of any addiction, any drugs, or any paraphernalia, or you may not know anything about it, but this is where we gain knowledge and wisdom now. And at least we gain a heart to say, okay, somebody talk to me about this. I don't know that people handle grief with addictions. Paul, I'm telling you one thing. When we start talking about addictions, you can't sit up and talk about what somebody ought to be ashamed of themselves or being addicted to that. They ought to go over that anytime they want to. I know we can right now be so addicted. Most people have a pain in the neck because we're addicted to the electronics. We probably can't walk 5 steps without looking down now. Do you know that's an addiction? That's something that you just didn't realize. It's fun, it's cool, and it seems like it's not hurting anybody. But boy, we're addicted to it. I'm always laughing around our church about being addicted to Pepsi. There was a time when I could not go. We would have to. I used to drink Pepsi. You know how your preacher drinks water during the preaching? I would drink Pepsi in the pulpit, because I just had to have it. The new generation kind of thing. And it was just, and I didn't know that I was addicted. I thought it was just something that I liked. I didn't realize that I couldn't do without it. I couldn't go to bed without it. I'd get up in the morning and drink one. And then it started affecting my health, and then that's when I had to stop. And so I recovered until yesterday. And I just, I prayed I prayed over it, and it's gonna be all right. But and so I want to. You may see me, hear me say a few fun things, y'all. We're not poking fun at it, but it's the only way that I can handle this subject with some people, knowing that now we're trusting God at a very early age. Young people can become addicted. No one can really calculate the grief and the shame or the poverty that alcohol addiction has caused a lot of people. Please, and if you're in a room with someone right now, please don't do that thing where we look over to the side and go, "He's talking about you right now," because this is one of the reasons that people stay in this moment of grief, and this is one of the reasons that the survivor won't talk to anybody. And I'm not giving a reason for it. I'm not giving an excuse for it. But if I'm going to be used by God today to talk to you, then I want to talk to you. I want to talk to you. I have to. That's why God ordained this service. And that's what our young people say. We want to handle this grief. But when will they start? How soon does one start? Now, there are a lot of myths that are associated with alcoholism and addictions. Some people say that only certain people with a certain genetic propensity toward alcoholism are prone to become addicts. Your mama did it, your daddy did it, so that probably is going to be what happens to you. Sometimes these are all myths. If you're raised in a family that's dysfunctional and your parents are not there and they drink, you're probably going to drink too. And I'm just saying these are myths. But a lot of times people grow up, and because you were exposed to these things very early, you're determined to not do them. So we can't predict in advance who might and who might not succumb to alcohol. The foundation of the person that's addicted to alcohol or drugs or anything like that is found in all people. It's found in a normal desire, and here's where it comes from. It comes from a normal desire to make it through life. Listen to me carefully. It comes from a normal desire to make it through life with the least amount of pain and the greatest amount of pleasure that's possible. That's where addiction comes from. That's the foundation of it. That's the foundation of it. It's found in a normal desire to make it through life. And I should have probably written this down, but I didn't. I'm sorry. So I'll talk it slow in case somebody else is writing it down, or if I'm speaking directly to you. And I'm not giving an excuse. I am not. I'm giving a hand. I'm reaching out. We have to. But it's found in the person who's trying to make it through life with the least amount of pain and the greatest amount of pleasure that's possible. Every one of you that are listening, we all have this desire to avoid pain and live a life of happiness. That's just what we want. And so sometimes the addict, if he or she is young, older, there's no gender, there's no age, there's none of it. But the addict thinks that they found a way to avoid sadness. I don't have to be sad. I can do this thing, and whatever his or her addiction is, it always makes this promise. It always makes the promise that if it's followed, there's going to be some fulfillment, and you're going to feel okay. If you just do this, you'll be all right. That's the promise that the addiction makes to the person once they start getting into it. And come on, y'all. It can be food. It could be gambling. It could be smoking. It could be sex. Whatever that addiction is, it'll make the promise that I will make you feel a sense of fulfillment, a feeling of aliveness if you just do this one more time. And then one more time becomes something that becomes a promise. Okay? And then the addiction kind of starts giving the feeling of escape without the need to feel harsh, or the harsh pain of reality is what I should say. Without feeling harsh or whatever you were going through. Sometimes if it's alcohol, it can replace it. Now, I'm talking to you as a person that's never had a drop of alcohol in my life. I've never drank alcohol. I had one drink of alcohol when I was a little kid. Like everybody else in the projects, your mama left something on the counter. They had company. You know, they leave little things out there, and your mama has these people over there all listening to the hi-fi. We call it the hi-fi as a stereo record player, and they were probably smoking and putting cigarettes in the little cans, and you know, a little bad kid, your mama leave and the company goes outside and they leave that stuff there, and you drink that one time. I remember one time I did that as a little old boy. I drank that, but whoa, boy, I started spinning around, and I swear God, if you just let me stand still, I'll never do that again. So that was the only time. But so I'm not gonna sit here and talk as if I know how easy it is for someone to stop this addiction, but I want to walk you through it. I want to walk you through it. I want to take my time with it, and I'm going to beg you. I'm going to plead with you. Don't click off, because see, hearing this is like, well, I'm a grown man, I'm a grown woman, I'm a professional, I don't have to do this, I can do this. And the whole secret is to hide you into this area where, and we just saw the percentage. We just took the test here. We went live so that you can 90% of us know someone whose life has been destroyed because of alcohol. But the first myth is, that's the first myth, is that, only people born in a certain types of family going to drink. That's a lie. Doesn't happen that way. Let's go to the second myth here that I want to talk about. Myth number 2 is that all addicts end up on Skid Row as homeless beggars on the street. We got this thing that we think that, if a person's an addict, they're, bum on the street, sloppy, drunk, smelling. Nope. There are millions of addicts, and they're found functioning in vocational jobs. They work full time. They're happy. They're smiling. They're not the problem on their jobs. Let's go ahead and keep that other slide back there for me for just a second. Students who abuse drugs in colleges, if not every day, then every weekend. I've gone to college with people that would do that, and they went to class and they studied, and I'm serious, they could get drunk. I'm not encouraging anybody to drink now, but they could pass all their exams, but hidden beneath in the real world where they were was a world of drugs and alcohol. They didn't even know that they would smell the way they would smell. They were so used to it, and they were able to move from one world to another world without any people really knowing that they were addicted. No one said it, no one noticed it, because it was just how they learned to function. So that whole myth about, well, I'm not out in the street, wetting, urinating on myself and out of control. That's if you're waiting on that before you discover someone's addicted, that survivor is addicted, then that's just a myth. That's not the truth. Okay? And the reason I think that a lot of people probably aren't seeking help is because they can function well enough to get by. So why do you need help if you're okay? And so they tell themselves that they're going to get control of their habit, but always remember that the addictions always lie. Always. Always. Okay? So if I'm talking to someone who's grieving and I know that they've gotten into this addictive, compulsive behavior, and now I'm addicted, and I'm listening to you tonight, Rickie Rush, and I'm really understanding that you're not pointing a finger, you're not condemning anybody, and anybody who's online or listening that could take this and try to move it out of context, I'm just going to pray for you. But if I can just help one person, then I've done what the Lord has asked me to do. But I want to see if we can't right now help someone who might be going down that road and not know it. What does it have to do with grief? It has to do with you, the survivor. You're the survivor. And there are so many survivors who have gotten into habits that they can't get out of. And it could be because we don't want to act like it's very real for us. And addictions are very, very real. So let's go down the path to alcohol and maybe some drug addiction. Okay? What are the steps in becoming addicted? Someone just sent a great question, great comment, that when you're going through the steps, and thank you for all of you who have gone through this for the support. I appreciate the questions that are coming in. Someone just said, you really stop caring about what someone else notices about you. Well, thank you for sharing that, and maybe that can help somebody else. I'm just listening to what you have to say. That's what I want to major in with this discussion, is hearing from you. But one of the things that from gathering conversations that I've just had, and I'm not an expert counselor, I'm not any of that stuff, okay? But if you understand the path that someone goes through, we're in a better position to help that person retrace those steps and find their way out, okay? So I don't know if anybody's ever talked about the path, okay? But if we can talk about the path, maybe if I know how I got here, if someone can tell me how my friend or my cousin got here, maybe I can go back and say, oh, wow, let's just backtrack. And if we can find out how we got here, then we can figure out how to stay out of it or how to get back out of it. Now, please don't, when you're hearing me, I know God is a healer, everybody. We're in church and we're talking about this tonight. But understand right now, some that may be addicted may not even have a relationship with God yet. So I'm going to show you how alcohol addiction starts. This is how it all starts. It all starts with the first drink. It all starts with the first drink. What? Yeah. If you never take that first drink, you'll never become addicted. So maybe I'm talking to a 14-year-old today whose classmates will say, hey, man, take a little of this. When I was in school, kids would go and they drink, I guess, different kinds of alcohol. It was clear and people couldn't tell. But it was always that first drink. And after that first drink, you start experimenting with that substance, whatever it is, it produces a mood change. And so that's when your mom or somebody said, what, boy, what's wrong with you? No, that first drink. And I didn't do that to make fun of anyone, but you didn't know that it was going to have you talking to people. And you're looking over here and they're standing right there. And your mood changes. And your vocabulary sometimes changes. And then sometimes gorging yourself with food, if a person going through that, you feel a sense of control then. And then there's a promise of that fulfillment. If you're addicted to the substance or whatever it is, you may sometimes, person may want to eat a lot. And if your addiction is food, now I'm not going to say you got to start with the first hamburger. No, we're going to have to eat. Sometimes there's a sense of satisfaction, though, that a person can get from that. And the addiction will help that person to maybe, in their eyes, eliminate the pain. We're not condemning here. We're reaching out and we're helping. That's all we're trying to do. And when young people ask for help, and when adults ask for help, in real common words, we have to try to help. Okay, so I want to put up another, I want to go to another place in the cloud. If you're listening, now no one knows your name, no one knows we don't know anything about you. We really don't. And I just hope that we don't abuse the system. And if we have anything derogatory, we just won't post it right now. But if you're at 22333 in your box there, you don't have to keep going back to it. And if you're just joining us, you're at IBOC texting. We're going to put up a word cloud here. And I want to ask a question. What do you think people experiment with the most? What do you think that people, and you just write an answer down. Okay, you write it. We're gonna put it there. Which is easier to be addicted to. What do you think? What do you think that is? And while you're talking, I'm going to put it up here in a second, and then we're going to try to see what you think. Spell it any way you want to. Write a sentence if you want to, but I just want to hear from you, and I want you to holler back at me right quick. See, alcohol or drugs create a sense of euphoria. It gives you happiness, and people who are high on drugs, or people can say wasted or whatever it is. You go into what you call a euphoric trance, and that trance probably makes you think. It makes you feel like there's a pleasurable sensation, but it detaches you from pain because you're in this feeling now, and this feeling is helping you overcome all that other pain stuff. So let's see what people experiment the most now. These are coming from you, and the more you send in, the larger it gets. If 1,000 of you just said alcohol, that's why alcohol is so big. So let's just look at that on your screen right now. Okay? Wow. So we're okay, I thought it was done. It's constantly coming. Now, I'm not an expert, so please forgive my ignorance that I cannot elaborate on these. I see meth. I don't know if that was short for Methodist Hospital, but probably not. No. Okay. And we're not poking fun. I'm not an expert on these things. God has told me to open up my heart, and I'm going to open up my heart, open up this ministry, because we got to have a place to come. We just got to have a place to come. But it looks like alcohol, weed, I think weed, blow, beer, sex. Sex is an easy one. Cigarettes, killers, marijuana, cocaine. Okay. Now, we're talking about what do people experiment with the most. Is the word cannabis? I don't know. Bullying? Wow. I don't know if bullying is a kind of a drug. But remember, okay, so we constantly see, though, this big one that's constantly getting bigger and it's not going away, and that's alcohol. So I was kind of hoping, or not hoping, but wondering if alcohol would kind of shrink as other things came up, but it's not shrinking. So stay with me for a second, and let's kind of deal with that. So we understand that there's this trance you go through, and I'm going to call it a euphoric trance. It's like I'm going through something that's unreal, but I don't want to feel what's really real. And so no wonder one of the drugs that people use is called ecstasy, because I don't want to deal with what's real. And if I can get something in my system to help me not deal with what I'm doing that's about to be really crazy, I can go through it. So we have to understand that there's a mood change, but that mood change usually comes after that first drink. And we're just trying to figure out now, how does it start? A lot of alcoholics can describe in detail that first drink experience. And now listen, here's what I just said. I said the word alcoholic. Now I know what's about to happen. I am not an alcoholic. I can stop anytime I want to. Now remember, it always lies. Not you, it does. I'm not an alcoholic because I drink alcohol. That doesn't make me an alcoholic. Okay, and I'm not here to argue that. I'm here because when a person is grieving, sometimes the survivor of that person who's loving something, the easiest thing to do is to hide the pain. That's where we are today. Person can go through gambling. People that can gamble can have that same euphoric experience. You just go through, it's like a high. I remember when I was younger, I went to an auction, and I didn't even know, I didn't know it was gambling. It was gambling to me. I mean, not saying that going to the auction is gambling, but I got this high from outbidding someone, and I didn't realize I was bidding on a truck, and the person that I was bidding against owned the truck. And I was just like, I don't remember the numbers. Like, okay, $100. Okay, I'm $200. He $400. I'm $500. $600. $700. And I didn't even need the truck, but I needed to beat this dude. Man, I was at that auction, and so that's just a word to some of you who are in gambling right now. Yeah, you start out with that little tear-off card and them little snake eyes at 7-Eleven, and you holding up the line is already 6 feet, and now you're going to have another 12 feet because you need 24 lottery tickets to I don't know. But anyway, that's a feeling. There's sometimes when you're addicted to even gambling, you don't know it. You can start out very early and you just get extremely competitive. You will stay up all night to win a game of dominoes. And you still can't count good. Boy, you can get that high from it though when you start to win. I don't know how many people have gone to slot machines and all those things, man. You once you pull that slot, ring, ring, and that noise. Oh my gosh. Ring! When you hear that bell, that's kind of like that first time drink, that first time high. And so usually the addict can recall that first few powerful highs that made them confident. And no matter how many people disappoint him, no matter how he's mistreated, no matter how he's shouted at and made fun of or screamed at or misunderstood, there's a world that he can get into real quick. It's a world that holds a promise of happiness. It's a world that he can escape from. And it will always, always, always provide the fix that he needs. And that's what happens when that first time starts. Now, look at this. There's a pleasurable sensation that detaches that participant from what he's doing, from the pain of reality, creating a whole new world. I'm just talking about the path. Now, this is not comfortable to talk about unless we're in a setting like this where nobody's looking at anybody, nobody sees anybody, nobody's pointing a finger at anybody. Nobody's trying to make anybody seem, embarrassed. Okay? You're in a safe place right now. You're really in a safe place. And God has brought us all in here together because every one of us can be affected by someone else who decides to take this route. All right, so let's say the first thing is that first drink. Now here's where I'm going to try to sit still here, but man, I'm excited that somebody's going to get blessed. I just know it's going to happen. All right, the second thing that happens on that path is that there's a transfer of faith to this particular substance. Now something is happening that we never imagined. There is a new God in his or her life. Okay? The person that starts to drink or goes into alcoholism probably always had a great relationship with God. I'm never going to say that they didn't do that. That's wrong, and you should never, ever, ever say that about people. You don't know their relationship with God. The only relationship you know about is your relationship with God. But when they love God, they needed something. Now, this is going to be a little uncomfortable, so stay with me. It's going to be a little uncomfortable, but stay with me, all right? Shine the light on this one. This is going to be a little uncomfortable, but stay with me. They love God. They trust God. They believe God. But when something went wrong, God didn't come through. Okay, we're talking about a transfer of the faith. Put that back. Yeah, there you go. A transfer of the faith is going to the substance now. In other words, whenever I needed God, God didn't always come through. But whenever I needed Johnny Walker, Jack Daniel. Whenever I needed Jack Daniel or Johnny Walker or whatever the thing is, and please again forgive my ignorance. I don't want to try to act like I know that stuff. But anyway, that alcohol, that addiction, that weed, that whatever that person has been turned on to after that first time, it always comes through. God disappointed me. Friends disappointed me. So now I don't need God and I don't need my friends. And I have one substitute that will never disappoint me. And that's the way that addict starts to talk. And they understand that one thing that never disappoints is in that bottle. Every time every time you need him, it takes you to that other level. I need you to understand what this person is going through. That sounds like to somebody here who's trying to be a critic. I don't want you to criticize. I want you to understand, because we got to help. If a person is drowning, man, they got to know they're drowning. You hollering and screaming out that, that doesn't mean that they know they're drowning. They're splashing, but they're giving signs of drowning. So when I talk about the transfer of faith, now they're like, okay, I tried God, he didn't work. I tried being in love with you, you didn't work. I tried my friendships, didn't work. Now this thing, once someone introduces you to that first drink, I don't care how professional you are, how dignified you are, after you get there and it starts to answer, now that becomes a new God. Because now you can't depend on people, because you've almost soured every relationship you had. But you can depend on that substance. You can depend on that thing. And at least one thing in this world is secure, and that's that. And anytime I can go find it, I can get it, I can keep it hidden in the house, I can keep it in the closet, or I can have me just a set of friends for that one thing whenever I need to make it all go away. It doesn't matter if people are going to get killed. It doesn't matter, because I was in a trance when I drove that car and hit those people. I wasn't in my right mind, is what addicts have said. In my heart, I would have done it had I known, and that's what sometimes helps the person to get past it, is because they can say, I just didn't know what I was doing, and that can make it all right for some people. So put yourself in the shoes of a teenager right now. Life is cruel. People are evil. Your family is perhaps dysfunctional. And you can say, I don't know who mom is, where dad is. Mom works too much. I don't have to talk to my dad. Don't have this. And illness is struck in one of your parents, and you have to deal with a parent that's maybe sick, or a brother that's dying. You know, a relative. I mean, financial things are going on. We can't get my shoes. I can't have things that I need in school. Every time I get a girlfriend, she quits me. Every time I get a boyfriend, he quits me. And then you start feeling guilty because I'm not doing what the other kids are doing. And then eventually you start feeling rejected, because people will tell you, you need to loosen up a little bit. You need to enjoy yourself. I'm talking about the life of teenagers now. Have you just listened to them? Pressure. It's a lot of pressure. Folk tell you to loosen up, man. Have a good time. So in the safety of the friends who are looking out for you, you can kind of just say, okay, I'm going to try this. And maybe they try it for that first time then. And in school, I witnessed it even back in the dinosaur ages when we were in school. And I know the pressure is even greater now. God is distant. He's not answering. People are fickle. You can't depend on them. Life is full of sorrow. People are racist. People are unforgiving. People are hateful. But that bottle, every time you take a drink of that thing, it's going to be there to do the work. So I'm not being sacrilegious when I talk about this, but there's a transfer of your faith now to the substance, whatever that is. The enemy has so designed it that becomes the new God. Weed never fails. Alcohol never fails. The bottle never fails. In gathering these conversations and having these lectures over the years, I've been able to talk to several age groups and college students in particular. And sometimes I've talked to college students who said, I would drink almost every night, go out and make a little money out on the street. And I say on the street, in clubs. And it didn't matter how many men I slept with. I didn't even have to know them. But because I would wake up the next morning and realize that I was drunk, I didn't know what I was doing, it helped me to get over it, because I realized that I had to do that to loosen up. Because being in my right mind, there's no way that I would have been with that guy or that many guys, especially ugly ones. I just had to make that up. I'm just got to loosen up here a little bit. But really, but then I've heard so many say that, but because I was not in my right state of mind, it was all right. So I had what they would call euphoria without guilt. And I've heard a few young ladies and gentlemen say, and that's more than God could do. Because whenever I tried to do and be right with God, I felt guilt later on. But I had that bottle and did it, didn't feel guilty. I'm talking about the transfer of faith to the substance. And I have to stay on this because this becomes the new God. This becomes the Lord and Savior. But of course, when we transfer our trust from God to the substance, then we start to break that covenant with God. And when the substance takes the place of God, it becomes your idol. And Satan loves it when you switch idols. So during these moments, there's a bonding that develops between the person and the substance. And with this bonding comes a loss of control. And so now the participant, whoever he or she is in the drugs and with the alcohol, starts to surrender his life to the substance in exchange for the promise that it'll make me better next time. And life is not as painful as it once was because I still have this God that I can depend on. I'm just talking to the survivor now. And maybe this is the first time wherever you are, you can look over on your cabinet or in your cupboard right now. You can see several bottles that help you escape. And God is trying to help you get past pain. But you've maybe chosen another God. And I know that sounds so horrible. It sounds so mean. And I'm not accusing you. I'm not. But unlike God, let me get ready to close with this now. These substances, they don't keep their promises. They make a whole lot of promises. And maybe I made it sound really advertising and juicy for somebody, but they don't keep their promises. They don't. God keeps his promises. Now I was trying to hold back on the pastor part of it, young people, but these things don't hold their promises. After that high is passed, the emptiness and depression starts right there again. It's gone. But God will heal and he'll take care of you. But when this wears off, there you go, right back again. And now you got to go back into the real world. And you have to this time go back into the real world. And guess who your friend is now? You're accompanied by shame and regret and a feeling that you've been belittled. And the longer the addict ponders about what he's done, the more overwhelmed by a sense of shame and regret you're going to have. And so you curse the bottle and you'll say, I'm never going to do this again. And you know you've been cheated out of a sense of accomplishment, not to realize sometimes the lives you've hurt and the people that you've destroyed in a path to go and worship that false god. Then you got the emotional pain that kind of gnaws at you. But when it starts to get that bad, you go back to that God again. And that's one more drink. And I can do this and I don't have to worry about it tomorrow. It can get the edge off. And then we start asking the bottle, can you repeat yourself one more time? And that's when you start to drift back again into the quote, of the world. How did you get there? Through a transfer of faith to that substance. But it never keeps its promise. It never does. So as we start to talk about grief around us, isn't it amazing that one of the most powerful things that seemed to have opened when the church had to close was a place to buy the substance? When the house of God has to shut down, place where spirits are sold are considered essential businesses. I'm just trying to help a child. I'm just trying to help a kid because I'm that first drink. It's that first one. It's that first whatever it is. And we've been talking about this path. The path, number one, is that first drink. We're talking about how did they get there? How did you get there? Maybe you've been in this addiction for years. Said, how did you get there? That first drink. Nobody's ever talked about it until today. And I hope that even if you're listening, even if you're upset and angry, and I'm cool with it. It's okay. This is one of the greatest sermons in love you'll probably ever have to remember. But that thing goes down to that first drink. Then we start transferring it. And then the third step, and the last one we'll talk about today, I guess, is the development of a protective shell. Because you're going to need that to sustain your addiction. I can't let this shell down. I got to have something around me that's going to keep me. And usually they got to be the people that's doing what I'm doing. So when I'm doing it, I don't need them around until I'm ready to do what I'm doing. And it serves as a twofold purpose. First, I have, I don't know if you've ever seen a turtle before, but a turtle walks around. When it knows the coast is clear, it sticks its head out and goes to walking. But when it's threatened by anything, it goes into this shell. Okay? And there's a protective shell that a person goes into when they're going into an addiction. And parents may experience it with kids. And I know this may not seem that dazzling right now. But I used to think we had to talk about this when people started in the 20s and 30s. But no, I think right now, 11 and 12-year-olds are getting turned out very, very early now. So maybe we have a bigger responsibility for this conversation that we keep trying to ignore. But that shell is needed to sustain the addiction. I gotta keep everybody out of this space. Why? First of all, so that the addict can sink deeply into his or her own fantasy and his ecstasy. I cannot, because if anybody notices it, they're going to try to get me some help. They're going to try to get me some help. And I don't need any help. I need my stuff. I need my drink. I need my weed. That's the first reason that shell goes up, and I'll let you write that down. And then the second reason that they have a shell there, that we have a shell there, is to keep people out. You got to make sure that no one's going to disrupt that mood change you're about to go through. Because if something's going on with you, you're oversleeping, you're talking crazy. No, I have this shell up so that I got to keep myself from being noticed by people that my moods have changed. I can't let anybody in here. Since shame is more powerful than physical pain, this wall is going to stay up to keep me from being exposed by people. So that's part of that road into it. How did that person get into it? First drink. Transfer it. They made that. It became like God. It never failed. And then that protective shell goes up. That's the direct ingredient. So you don't like this person's addiction? You don't like it? You're upset with it? It doesn't matter. That person can live without your blessings. They can live without your acceptance. And they can live without your approval. Say what you want to say. his drug or his alcohol, the bottle will take him where he wants to go. It'll keep on creating this world for him. And people who live with an addict will find it very difficult to maintain a meaningful relationship with you. It's very hard to reason with someone who's going through an addiction with alcohol or something. Can go through a series of arguments, mood swings that will simply just have to be accepted, since there's no use in really trying to help that person to go through it, because he or she does not realize it's an addiction. And so to live with himself, there's that shell again. And inside that shell, this is my world, and I don't have to let anybody in here. And now that shell has to become thicker and thicker, because somebody might crack it and say, I think you're doing something. But it becomes thicker and thicker, less prone to cracks, less prone to vulnerabilities. And from now on in that person's life, everyone exists for only one purpose. And that's to maintain his or her way of life. The only reason the addict wants you around is so that you can help pay for what they need or help them maintain what they need. That's your reason for being around. That's your reason. All right. So I wanted this session to end today at 7:30, and I want us to stay on time. But what we're going to do right now, we're going to go into one other area of our word wall here, our word. I want to ask a question, and I want you to just text the answer in or put it up on our word cloud. We're going to stay close. And it's real simple. The question is real simple. Do you feel as if this is a very worthwhile conversation to continue to have about the one about alcoholism? Do you feel that it's a very worthwhile? Because at some point, Pastor, it sounds like people just going to do what they want to do and just let it go. Now, I'm not done with the discussion on it. But because I know how impactful it is, and I know how hard it is to digest it, I want us to have a chance to answer that one question. I want everybody to take the opportunity to get involved with it. Sometimes when we have regular church service, now this is one of those different services that's not, I wouldn't classify as a regular service, because now we're dealing with, we found out 90% of us, 89% of everyone listening right now says, yeah, I know people whose lives have been destroyed. And maybe they've destroyed yours. And maybe you're dealing with a funeral that you have to deal with because somebody drinking and driving had it, or maybe because someone in their wrong mind had a gun and they got high. And we talk about all these cases where we deal with mental illness. And some of this we could probably avoid ourselves. But I wanted to know, do you feel this conversation is worth having? Let's see. Because that means that if it is, we're willing to say, can we come back in here next Sunday and finish this? I have a cousin that might need to hear this conversation. Or I have a nephew. Or I have a spouse. But we don't want anybody coming here feeling threatened and condemned and a finger pointing at them. We don't want anybody coming in here feeling like, man, I went to church and they beat me up. No, that should not be the case at all. God loves us so much, y'all, that sometimes he says, I want you to help somebody, but before you help them, I want you to know how deep they are. I want you to know how far they're sinking. Oh, please don't give me any of those phone calls about, come on, Pastor Rush, you got to toughen up and be tough on them. You've never been addicted before. Maybe you've never been a person who never had to have one of them powdered donuts. Man, when you got to have a powdered donut, you got to have a powdered donut. That's an addiction. You can't go to QT without getting a hot dog. You know what an addiction? That's an addiction. You'll pass three 7-Elevens to find you a QT with the right hot dog. All you got to do is realize and think about the stuff you're addicted to. Chips. I said chips. Not just chips. Lay's. Not just Lay's. Barbecue Lay's. Addiction. Some of you know right now you should not have any more cinnamon rolls. But you got one by the nightstand right now. Not just cinnamon roll. Cinnamon roll with crushed pecans on the top. And you're so addicted you got a microwave in your drawer. You just open up, sting, boom, like you in some crazy cheap hotel or something. Because you got to have it. Now, of course, I'm being really silly in those things, but we all have things. And I don't want anyone to ever feel condemned, man. Because if God is throwing out a rope through Inspiring Body of Christ Church, that means he wants you to grab hold. Because we have now come into your life tonight because we are what God would call a symbol of hope. Somebody cares. Somebody can love you back. And when you're grieving through a death or a divorce or a separation or a loss of a job or whatever is causing you to grieve, man, that bottle, that addiction becomes a good friend that's always there. So tonight we opened up a door, and I think maybe it's just a crack in it. And I know it's the right thing to talk about. I know it is. Now, if you've been listening and you have a critical ear, you may say, well, you didn't ever talk about Jesus. You didn't ever talk about coming out. You already know Jesus. You already know to come out. And if you don't, God is saying, I want to use you to help someone else who doesn't even know they're drowning. Remember, their God never fails them. So maybe we need to practice a little bit more about understanding. Not understanding that it happens, but understanding how to help them out.
Thank you, Father, for revealing your word to me today.
Thanks for watching and for being bold and unashamed. Looking for even more content from IBOC and Pastor Rickie G. Rush? Make sure you're following IBOC and Pastor Rush on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For even more info right at your fingertips, the new mobile app is available for iOS and Android in the iTunes and Google Play stores. And don't forget that an important part of accomplishing God's mission are the tithes and offerings we receive from faithful viewers just like you. Won't you make a difference and become a fisher of men, supporting the ministry work of IBOC and helping us change thousands of lives all over the world? Visit us online at ibocchurch.org or on our mobile app to make your donation. You can also give through Givelify in just a few short steps. Thanks for your support. That's it for now, but be sure to tune in next week for another powerful message from the Master Illustrator, Pastor Rickie G. Rush.